Can one audio interface really do it all for creators? In this video, I'm going to show you why the Lewitt Connect 6 is the only audio interface you're going to need. Welcome to Strums to Stage. I'm Andrew Wink, and I help musicians like you go from players to performers, creators, and leaders in your music scene. Recording is a huge part of every musician's journey, and many of us have our own audio interfaces at home to accomplish what we need to do, whether that's recording vocals, recording demos, or writing songs, or creating content like I am right now. In this video, I'm going to walk through my audio interface of choice, the Lewitt Connect 6. Let's jump in. So let's start with looking at the hardware first. So the Connect 6 has what's called a desktop form factor. So what that means is it sits flat on your desk, like so, as opposed to a rack mount audio interface, like something like the Focusrite Scarlett, where the controls are on the front. Looking at the very top, the only control we have here is this big knob, which can be used for a lot of different things. You will notice that, and I press select down, it will take you to the different settings on here, such as input 1, which is what my microphone is currently plugged into, and you'll see we have different levels popping up as I talk. And then you can adjust the gain more or less as you see fit. And then you tap the button to go to the next thing. So right now we're on input 2. This is our mix for headphone 1, which is what I'm currently using right now. And I turn that down to make it quieter and then bring it up to go louder. Headphone mix 2, our main output, and then we go back to input 1. Now, let's show you where those inputs are. So we're going to start with the front. So here, giving the camera a second to focus. So these are our two dedicated headphone outs. We have headphone jack 1, which is what I'm currently plugged into, and then jack 2. Now, the beautiful thing, I'm going to unplug input 1 for a second. Headphone 1 is a 3.5 millimeter jack, which is a regular headphone jack, and then headphone 2 is a 1/4-inch input. So when I have used this for tracking sessions, I bring my Sony headphones that have a 1/4-inch adapter and use that one, and then my bandmates will bring headphones that maybe not have adapter, so one will plug into this one over here, and then the other one will plug into the back. So let's move back over here. So we're going to start on the left. So these are our combo jack inputs for 1 and 2. This cable is plugged into my microphone right now, which is the input 1. And then we have input 2, which is the exact same. This red cable and blue cable, these are the outputs for my studio monitors, and these are the main outputs. We also have a headphone jack here as well. So this would be where the third headphone set would plug into. And you technically can get the same audio coming out of our mains and our headphones. You don't have independent control of either of these setups. So it's not really, I can't see a good use for either of them, but you can use one or the other, which is pretty awesome. Jumping over to the end, this cable is plugged directly into my computer. This is just a standard USB-C port. We also have one for phones, so you can plug your phone directly into it, and that would act as an audio interface. And then we have a separate power source for if you're using this for a phone, because the unit is bus powered. It's currently getting power from the computer. A phone is not going to be that powerful, so you'll need to plug in a separate USB cable for power. And then we have another 3.5 millimeter jack for an aux input, so you could take audio from something that would use an 1/8 inch, like I'm going to say a DVD player or something like that, but you have the ability to plug in an aux cable if you need it. And those are the controls for the hardware. So now we're going to dive into the software for the unit, and you'll see where the magic happens. Okay, jumping into the software right now, we have 5 big sections to control the audio interface. We have our hardware inputs, which controls these 4 gray strips here. We have software channels, which control these 4 strips. We have maximizer mixes, loopback channels, and hardware outputs. Let's start with our hardware inputs first. So we have 2 strips on the left. These are for those XLR inputs. We have each one for 1 and 2. At the very top, we have this auto setup button, which is really cool. We'll get to that in a second. We have a big knob here, and this controls our input gain for whatever source we use. And we have a stereo link button here as well. So if you're plugging in a keyboard with or any other stereo line output, you could plug those in together and link the two channels so you don't have to adjust all the settings on both of them. So you have our input gain knob. We have three controls over here. So we have 48 volts for phantom power. This would be for condenser microphones or any other equipment that would require phantom power. We have a low cut, which is great for vocals. And then we have a phase inverse control. We also have a mute button for each of these channels, which will completely mute the signal if you need to. And then Lewitt also has three built-in effects. We have an expander. So this acts kind of like a gate, and it actually gives us a signal for where it comes through. So you have a white line underneath here. That is the floor. So any sound that is quieter than that line gets completely cut out. And then it shows us the level, everything else over top of that, which is really cool. We have a built-in compressor, which is kind of the opposite. So you'll notice the more that I talk, the louder I get, this red line comes down a little bit. So this essentially makes sure the audio is even all the way through. And it is really, really awesome to have this visual display to see what's going on. And then you have these controls down here as well, which are pretty standard for compressors. Next up, we have an EQ section, which for this, we're going to walk through the audio setup in a second, but I did it before I began filming. So it gave a couple notches at about 240 hertz right there. And this is 2100 hertz. And then we can adjust all the other settings as we need to. The beautiful thing, well, we'll get into presets overall for the overall settings as well, but you can have individual presets for each of these effects. So if you have an EQ setting that you really like for your voice and you record pretty regularly, you can save it onto just the effect, which is really, really neat. And then down here, we have two faders. So input one will automatically default at its set level, which we have our meters will set that as well. But then we have this A and B. So the Connect 6 has two different mixes you can use within the interface, mix A and mix B. So these can adjust, you can turn on if it's sending. So right now I have this channel 1 going to mix A, but not going to mix B, which is why the bar is grayed out. And then I can adjust the level for the mixes as you see fit. You're probably not going to hear any decrease in volume as I have these mixes. The input is set to record within Studio One, and that is running in the background. But it will not change with this fader. It will get impacted by the gain and the mute button. Okay, so before we move away to the next input list, let's run through the auto setup real quick. So it walks us through what's the setup best for our system. So I am using a Shure SM7B, which is a dynamic microphone, so this will be this one in the center. It also has a setup for condenser microphones, which is essentially most microphones that take phantom power is the big difference between the two. If you know the microphone model you have, you'll know whether it's a condenser or a dynamic microphone. And then we have a line input setting for keyboards, DI guitars, any other instrument that requires a 1/4 inch and takes in a certain level. So for this, we're going to click dynamic microphone. And then it'll give us two settings that we can adjust. So we can do the advanced setting, which can go through the gain, automatically set our low cut filter and expander and compressor just to make sure it's smooth as possible. If we want to do something super quick, this is just for the gain. So I've done the advanced already. We're just going to do the basic for the sake of time for the video. So I'm just going to click on that. And then now it measures. So it will be a little quiet. It might not even pick me up as I'm talking about it. But essentially, I'm going to talk into the microphone to let it set at levels. And then here it comes back on. So it will give a rough level based upon where you are. And it has set up at 42 dB. So that's pretty awesome. And then with the advanced, it'll go through all of those effects as you need to. So we have input 2, which is the exact same controls. And then we have two more inputs. So we have a aux input. This is where that would show up from the back of the interface. And then we also have a mobile in. So when you plug in your phone, this would be the input that comes from your phone. Moving below these aux and mobile ins, we have these master mixes, which these are essentially just limiters for our mixes. So I could turn up the gain knob on mix A and it will sound more compressed and more full. So this will be a great solution if your headphones are super quiet, or if you really need to compress and make the mix louder. So moving on to our software channels. So we have 4 stereo channels, which is really, really awesome. A great way that I would use this is if I'm recording a session in a DAW. So let's say I have drums tracked, bass, guitars, keys, and we're just tracking vocals for that as well. So you can separate these into buses based on what you need. So for example, output 1 and 2 could be drums, 3 and 4 could be bass, 5 and 6 could be guitars, and 7 and 8 could be keys. And these are just for monitoring. And then you can adjust the mix based upon where the level for the singer. So mix A could be for the singer. Hey, I want to hear less drums, more guitar. All right, drums go down, the guitar would be up. And then mix B could be for myself as the producer, where we want everything a little bit more balanced just to hear everything come together. And then moving on below that, we have 3 loopback channels, which are really, really cool. Essentially what these do, these would be great. These take the audio output from your computer, let's say from Zoom or output from audio from a video game, and you can route it into your DAW and record it as a stereo track. So this is great for a podcast setting where you have 2 guests in the room on 2 microphones, and then you have a third or even a fourth on Zoom or some other software, and you can route their audio directly into your DAW from there, which is super, super cool. And then lastly, here are our hardware outputs. So at the top, we have our for our left and right for our monitors, and then we have 2 headphone mixes as well. So these are the 2 that are going to be on the front. This main out mix would be where your third headphones go, or for your studio monitors. But you can also decide what you want to listen to for these outputs. So right now everything is set to, or I'm sorry, the speakers are set to mix A, as are this first set of headphones that I'm listening to. Mix B is just set up to output 1 and 2. So back to our production example, in this case, they would be listening to just the drums. Whereas if they just wanted to hear their vocals by themselves, I would set that to input 1, and then they can listen to that directly. And then you also have an output for your phone to send the mix into that as well. So an example for that, let's say you're tracking content on your phone. You can set up your mix as you choose, and then it would route directly into your phone, which is really, really cool. And then as I alluded to before, all of these settings, your levels, your input gain, these can be saved as presets. So I'm just going to click the drop-down menu. Lewitt gives you, I believe it's these 3 that you start out with as great places to start. And then I've made a handful of others over the years as I've used them for tracking vocals, for tracking myself on guitar, that type of thing. I'm not going to dive into them here because that would mess up the recording, but I'm going to talk through a couple of situations where I've used this before. So the first one is using VoiceOver, just like what I have here. So this is just setting up input 1, and then you're pretty much off to the races after that. You can adjust your mix if you so choose. So it's as like if you're using background music, or if you're tracking guitar, you can use input 2 to track your DI or your amp, and then you can use output 1 as a backing track. So you can adjust those mix levels as you see fit, and then you'll be able to hear yourself quite smoothly. Setup number 2 would be my guitar tracking setup. So for me, I'm going to track I record using my Line 6 Helix, but I also want to track a DI as well. So what I will use is I'll plug my guitar into a DI box. The XLR out from the DI box will go into input 1, which that will be my DI signal, and then I'll have a cable into the through of the DI box, which goes into my Helix, and then the Helix XLR goes out into input 2. So I'm going to recreate that here. Actually, now that I'm looking at this, we're going to swap it. Let's say the DI is going to be in input 2 and the main track is in input 1, because I don't want to hear the DI as I'm tracking. I want to hear the Helix, but having the DI, I still want the DI to be recorded anyway. So if I click mute, like how input 2 is here, it's not going to pick up that signal. So what the workaround for that is leaving it live, but not sending it to any mixes. So that way it's completely independent on its own, and then adjusting the gain as you see fit. And then that's totally fine. As long as you're seeing levels, you'll be good to go. And then input 1 is going to be our helix, and you would adjust that same setup as we have done with our vocal microphone. If you're a musician who wears a lot of hats, performer, songwriter, producer, content creator, the Connect 6 gives you the flexibility to handle it all and take your creation setup to the next level. And if you're looking for more support or guidance to take your music to that next level, check out the Strums to Stage coaching program. You'll work with experienced coaches who'll guide you through realizing your vision for your project and teach you the skills to need to live that vision, along with many other musicians who are facing the same challenges and have those same dreams. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this helpful, hit like, subscribe, and let me know in the comments how you would use the Connect 6 in your setup. Thank you for being you, and I'll see you in the next video.